Chapter 36 The Burning. The summer festival was drawing near. The gorgeous fireworks exhibition at the bank was again the topic of the villagers. All the children went to the drugstore for some saltpeter and sulfur. They mixed it with charcoal powder to make gunpowder and enjoyed themselves by setting off the tiny fireworks in the evening. They knew of the popular fireworks such as drooping cherry, flying swallow, and so on, but it was too complicated for them to make, so they were satisfied with the simple fireworks. They poured handmade gunpowder into several bamboo tubes and hung them on a wire stretched tight between a pair of poles. Then they stood them at the water's edge and set fire to one tube after another. Some boys succeeded in making up a really nice device. A kindled firework traveled along the extended wire to touch the second one, which slid along to ignite the next. If the last one spun at ignition, it would be perfect. Some other boys even tried to set off a blue flame by adding iron dust to the gunpowder, though they seldom succeeded in it. One day, Jiro was sitting at his desk with a serious look. Seikichi crawled up to him from the veranda very silently and whispered in his ear, "I got it, Jiro-chan." It was some days after Haruko went away to Tokyo. He wished to be a good boy, but was too lonesome to accumulate good deeds. Recently, he was absorbed in making up his own fireworks and could not keep still in his room any longer. At last, he drew out some coins from his desk and handed them to Seikichi to get some saltpeter and sulfur. Holding him back with a hand gesture, Jiro took a peep into the next room. Otami was asleep. A fly was moving about on the sheet, then perched on her forehead, but she only knitted her eyebrows a little. Then it flew off. Grandmother was also lying on her side on a rush mat, showing her back to Jiro. She made it a rule to have a nap in the afternoon, for she often sat awake during the night. She could sleep better if Jiro was close by. He felt a little guilty to go out while grandmother was asleep. At Masaki's, it was forbidden for children to make fireworks because of the danger. When she was awake, he would have to make an excuse to leave, but it would be troublesome. Now that grandmother was asleep, it was a very good chance to mix the ingredients. Jiro rose up, signaled to Seikichi with a jerk of his head to go ahead, and followed him silently down the veranda. They hurried to the back of the mound in the garden. A bowl, a stirring stick, and a charcoal pot were already prepared by Seikichi. The two boys stirred the saltpeter first, then the sulfur. They rubbed the saltpeter and sulfur in different sheets of paper and placed them on a stone very carefully. Then they ground a lot of burnt charcoal, which took them a long time. They worked the pestle by turns, one pressing the bowl with his hands while the other was at work. The burnt charcoal had to be ground into powder so soft that you would not feel any rough particle between your fingers. The two boys worked so hard that sweat often dripped into the bowl from their chin. After grinding the charcoal enough, they put the sulfur and saltpeter into the bowl in a fixed proportion. They had only to stir it well. The stick was an ideal tool for that. Jiro stirred first and was taken over by Seikichi. After he had stared for some time, Jiro looked into the bowl with his face very close to it. "All right, that's enough," he said to Seikichi. If he had only stopped his work then, nothing would have happened, but Seikichi turned his stick with all his might for the last time as an extra service. Then it exploded. The sound was not loud but rather dull. The next moment, Jiro lay among the grass, face down as if he had been snapped back. "Jiro-chan, Jiro-chan," said Seikichi in his ear in a tense but somewhat constrained manner. Jiro did not faint but felt as if he were at the bottom of a muddy pond. He rose up at Seikichi's calling and opened his eyes. But his eyelashes felt rough, his face burning, and his skin drawn up so tense. "Is anything wrong with my face?" he said with a worried look. "It's white all over," he said. "The smoke has stained your face, I think." Jiro softly touched his cheek with his fingers. It felt slimy. He did not feel it very painful, but smart. Seikichi said, "Maybe you'd better wash it in water." Taking a glimpse at his mother's room and the drawing room, he scooped water in his hands from the pond and touched his face with it. At that moment, he gave a scream and ran to the back of the mound again. His face was inflamed red like raw fish. Seikichi shrank from his burnt face. Jiro was gasping hard for breath, lying on his back on the grass. A flame-like heat was bursting out of his face, but he could do nothing with it. He just kicked his hands and legs in the air to endure the burning pain. Seikichi was watching Jiro, trembling all over. Then he burst into tears and ran away. Soon Onobu came running with her children. She screamed to see Jiro. The part-time employees also came, followed by Kenzo and grandfather. From the veranda, grandmother called frantically, "What is it? What's happened out there?" For some time there was a lot of confusion while Jiro was groaning with his eyes shut. The pain became very severe, but in the midst of his groans, he did not forget to estimate how much they were surprised or in sympathy with him. He felt relieved to see that his misconduct seemed to have been forgiven, thanks to his horrible burnt face and his painful groaning. However, he did not have the presence of mind to make an excuse. Even if he did, the fact was too clear to conceal. How fortunate he was that his injury was so serious as to draw sympathy from the adults. He was carried to the main house carefully and consoled by all the Masakis. They pasted egg white all over his face and covered it with paper as first aid. Then he noticed the inflammation on his wrist stretching down to the thumb of both his hands. These parts were also pasted with egg white. After about an hour, Ryuichi's father came to see Jiro. He applied bad-smelling yellow ointment over his face and bandaged it round with gauze except for his eyes and mouth. He said, "It's not so serious because the burn was just on the surface, but you must not twist your face with laughter or cry, ha ha ha." The doctor gave his suggestion, laughing. He was told that he did not have to lie in bed, but Jiro knew that if he left his bed, he would have to go to see his mother. He did not want to be seen by her, so he stayed in bed even after the burn became mild. Many people came to see him and said, "How lucky you are not to be injured so badly," or "Is the pain over now?" They spoke very sympathetically, but he did not hear any other expressions. Seikichi was severely scolded by Onobu. In fact, he also had his right hand inflamed and blistered from the wrist down to the last finger, but concealed it from everyone. At night, he came up to Jiro and told him that he had been scolded by his mother as he applied the yellow ointment to his hand. "Didn't grandfather scold you?" he asked, for he was worried that he had not yet met him after the accident. Seikichi said simply, "No, he didn't." He gave his answer to so plainly Jiro was rather depressed. It seemed to him that grandfather's love toward him had not withered lately, but he had become a little too lofty to reach. Since the case of the beef, Jiro came to think of his grandfather hard to approach and felt it a burden to be loved by him. However, he did not want to flee from him because he was so deeply attached to him at the Masakis. If grandfather had really become cold to Jiro, even if just a little, he would be discouraged very much. It is true that he felt disheartened in parting from Haruko, but he would feel greatly depressed in a different sense to lose his grandfather's love. Jiro loved him at heart, but lost his nerve before him. It was similar to a case when you cannot jump into the sea because of the deep blue water, though you are tempted to dive in. He could do nothing but guess at grandfather's feelings toward him. Today he especially wanted to know grandfather's thought about him because he had committed such a misdeed. He was discouraged to hear Seikichi's abrupt answer. He could not understand what the old man thought of him. The next day he was too uneasy to lie in bed. He got up and marched to and fro in the room, wishing that he might be seen by his grandfather. He expected him to see and speak to him. Grandfather caught a glimpse of him but would not speak to him. If only grandfather spoke to him, Jiro would be filled with joy, even if it were a harsh word. But the old man did not talk to him at all. In despair, Jiro went to Otami's room in fear of being scolded again. She looked into his bandaged face and turned her eyes with a sigh. Grandmother said gently, "Please sit down, Jiro." Feeling a little easy, he knelt down by her. "You were fortunate that the burn was not very serious," she said. "How terrible it would be if your eyes had been burnt. You must not make fireworks again, understand?" Jiro nodded obediently. "By the way, did you apologize to grandfather?" she said. Jiro was taken aback. Everybody talked to him with sympathetic words, so he thought it unnecessary to apologize to anyone. When he was asked by grandmother, he knew that he should have gone to his grandfather in apology for his stupid error. "No, I haven't apologized to him yet," he said, but grandmother was silent. Now he understood why grandfather did not talk to him. He looked at Otami, but she said nothing either. Everyone was waiting for him to apologize to grandfather. It seemed to him that there was a secret agreement among them. Jiro stood up and went to see his grandfather, but felt out of place, because he had never apologized to anyone before he was scolded. But it was not the time to hesitate. Grandfather was talking with Kenzo at the veranda of the drawing room. Collecting his courage, Jiro knelt down and bowed to the old man rigidly in silence. "You came to apologize, didn't you?" said Grandfather Masaki. "This is good. Now you can feel easy, can't you?" Tears dropped from his eyes down to the veranda. "Don't weep any more, Jiro. If you cry, your bandage will get wet. What if your face is twisted? Ha ha ha," said the old man with laughter. Kenzo was also tempted into laughter, but Jiro kept sniveling for some time with his head drooping.